This is Patty Hodge, and this is Dr. Nurse's Rock. This video is part of a series on grief that we're doing throughout the month of April. And today's very special guest is Dr. Lucinda Grapenthin, who I know as Dr. Cindy. And I'm very grateful that she has decided to come today. I'm going to read to you quickly her biography. Dr. Grapenthin is a licensed psychologist, a registered play therapist, supervisor, and nationally certified school psychologist. She has over 25 years of clinical experience working with children, adults, and families. She's also an associate professor at Brenau University in the School of Psychology and Adolescent Counseling, and director of the Brenau Center for Counseling and Psychological Services. Additionally, she is a certified facility dog handler and utilizes a dog Currier in her psychology practice. Dr. Grapenthin authored her first children's book, Toby Toby Worry Free, which addresses childhood anxiety. She hopes to write more children's books. She's married and has 3 adult children. So thank you for being here, Dr. Cindy.
Thank you.
And
so great to be here.
I'm so happy that you're here. So, Dr. Cindy, you wanted to talk to us today about the theme of necessary losses.
Right. So, yes, when you were telling me about this program that you're doing and this focus on grief and loss, it reminded me of this book that I read a long time ago, and I still refer to it now. It's an old book. I looked at it this morning. It was published in 2002, so it's quite dated. But even now, when you read it, it has such resonance. It was written by Judith Viorst, who's most known for the book, a children's book she wrote, Alexander and the Terrible, Horrible, No Good Day, which is kind of funny. And it's a book I use sometimes when I'm working with children too, just kind of talking about like sometimes things just do not go the way you want them to go. But she's also written some books for adults, just on it's sort of like just developmental books for adults. She writes books about when she turned 40. She wrote about 40 in her 60s. But this book, Necessary Losses, resonated with me because it's the idea that loss is just inevitable. We're all going to experience loss and grief, and you can think about it just in terms beginning like the day we're born, right? I mean, we're in this nice, wonderful, warm and cozy womb that our mother has. And then we come out into the world and there's bright lights and there's talking and yelling and screaming and crying. And here we are, right? And so we're already kind of like, oh, wow, what's happening, right? To our nervous system and to our sense of who we are. And then the idea is that we have the idea of the idealized mother, right? And if attachment goes well, we grow up to be, somewhat kind of healthy adults and understand that. And of course, attachment is very important, and we don't want to overlook that because it's a biological function in the sense that it keeps us protected, right? It keeps us safe. We need to have, as children, as mammals, we need to have someone kind of looking over us, and as humans, for a longer period of time than most mammals. And it's a way of keeping us, safe from harm. And I always like to think about elephants when I think about attachment, because, elephants, the calves stay with their mothers for a very long time, almost as long as human moms or humans. But anyway, of course we all know, what I mean, if you live life and talk to people and experience different types of relationships, we know that sometimes, attachment can kind of go a little haywire, right? I mean, if you have a mother maybe who has her own needs as far as like if she's depressed or if the home is unsafe, if there's abuse, psychological abuse, emotional abuse, physical abuse, all those things obviously kind of impact, and just poverty and just being in a system too where maybe the mother does work, chooses to work, and she has to find childcare, and the childcare is not so great. I mean, all these things could kind of happen. So it kind of just makes, as we're growing as children, we kind of have the sense that like we've got this safe, secure system, and it evolves through time, right? Like what that means and what about safety means and acceptance means and how I'm supposed to be. And so, as we grow, we individuate, right? And then we realize that um, our parents aren't perfect, of course, right? They're human beings and they all have their flaws like we all do. And maybe they didn't show up the way that we wanted them to show up. And one of the just personal memories I have about that was when I was a young child. I remember one of my memories is this is when I was an adolescent, because when I was an adolescent, um, my mother was um, we were distant, and she just kind of like it was just one of those things where she just sort of irritated me, and like I felt like she wasn't kind of doing her job as a mother or something. I had this idea when I was a teenager. I kind of had sort of these expectations of what she's supposed to do. So I remember just being kind of angry. Then I went off to college, and I'm at college, and I had this revelation that my mom was doing the best that she could. And I remember writing this apology note to my mom and saying how much I loved her. And I'm, kind of sorry for just being such a, kind of a bratty teenager. And I remember she accepted that and with such grace. And she said, she goes, I was worried. I thought I was going to lose you.
Oh,
And she didn't lose me, right? And she's, she's here, she's still alive, and we still do a lot of things together. And not that our relationship's perfect by any means, nobody's is, but it's just, it reminds me of how, what she must have felt like as a loss, when I was behaving that way, right? And then to the loss that I felt when she wasn't there when I was in college, and I realized, how important she was to me. But you can think about when kids go off to kindergarten, friendships, marriages, some marriages, they start out great and then they don't end up that way. And there's a loss there. Even like with careers, you kind of, I think people sometimes think, oh, this is what I want to do when I grow up. And then they get into it and then they realize they don't. And maybe there's this unspoken message from their families that, oh, yes, this is what you're supposed to do. You're supposed to be a doctor, a lawyer, a nurse or something, right? But then people get into that and they realize that's not really what I want. That's what I want. And so it's a shifting in perspective. And I think when I'm talking to clients, a lot of times I think about, sometimes it's helpful to think about kind of your past self and these messages, but what do you want to tell your future self? And every day you have that opportunity, because every day is a new day, right? To tell your future self, what kind of a life do you want to live and what can you let go? And I do think sometimes there's a mourning, like, a mourning of like, oh, I wish it would have worked out. And I'm sad that it didn't, but also I have this new opportunity. Just when, you move from one neighborhood to another neighborhood. I know I'd had to do that a few years ago. And it shocked me how sad I was to leave my neighbors. Like, again, I kind of took them for granted and just enjoy them. It's not like we talked every single day and we're, besties, but there was a connection there, right? And then when it wasn't there again, I thought, wow, that really makes me sad. And I miss them, but I'm also making new friends, right? And having new opportunities and widening my experiences. So, loss is just, it's sort of, I think that if you can think about how to deal with a loss, or, a shifting in perspective of how you're supposed to be or how you want to be, how you want to show up and how you want others to show up. It's important to kind of stop and reflect on that. Like where is that coming from? Where are these messages coming from? Is this something that is what I'm wanting, or is this sort of what I kind of heard all my life, that I'm going to be, the pleaser in the family, the good person, and kind of give up maybe some things that I would like to do or some ways I like to be, because I have to be the one that's always pleasing others, or again, just kind of showing up in a certain way. I was even making some notes, and I was thinking about this morning about, I think organizations, can let us down and they can be a big loss. And different institutions.
big time.
Big time, right? I mean, if, don't want to get political, but you can think about just our government, even religious institutions, I think, places, school systems where I've worked and things like that, can be sometimes, I think the intentions is good, but then when you get into it, you realize, this system is not working very well. And, I'm going to have to, um, cut that one loose, and again, it's a loss because you kind of might thought it was going to be like this one thing or this certain thing. And then you have to, again, shift your perspective and think like, well, I learned a lesson there, so I need to move on. And maybe what can I do as far as, you know, being more educated, right, and more informed the next time I make a decision about joining an organization or getting involved in different things. So those are some of my thoughts about loss and, um, grieving and mourning, and really kind of spending time thinking about that and allowing yourself to do that too. I mean, it really is something that I think that people sometimes can get stuck in that and just sort of like, oh, what if, what if, what if? And that I would call that sort of the stuck and kind of ruminating. And then I think some people retreat. And when they retreat, they just go into kind of a dark place, sort of, and just like don't want to talk about it and just kind of shut themselves off. I think sometimes also they can be, using a substance, being addicted to, getting, you can kind of think about addictions or even like workaholics or something like that. Like, I'm just not going to think about that loss of my, again, if it was a partner, a child, or whatever, I'll just sort of like, again, retreat, just cut myself off from relationships, or, I think, again, kind of learning and growing and kind of trying to, figure it out, and doing what you need to do as far as getting assistance and support around that. And there's no one way to do that. There's so many different ways of getting support, through journaling, right? And writing yourself, reading, talking to people, just going for a walk with your dog and just spending some time thinking about these things, I think is helpful, as opposed to just sort of wanting to shove it down or, be angry about it, or again, go into that what if, because especially I think as women, we can kind of blame ourselves like, well, if only I would have done this or I would have been this. I don't know if you can relate to that or not, but certainly something that I do, right? If I just would have been a certain way.
Yes.
But I just I hope this is helpful in the sense that people can just sort of kind of think about um, what's happening in their lives and the shifting that's going around and being sad about it. Another personal experience I have, remember my son, he was my last child. He's the youngest of three. And, you kind of know this is going to be a special time. And he and I were real close when he was little until he got up to about like 9 or 10. And then he's like his dad. He's a real sports guy. And I could see this shift where he wanted, like before it was always me, he wanted to spend time with. And we had this, I felt like a really special relationship. And then, as a psychologist too, I could see his shifting more like wanting to be with dad and hanging out with dad. And dad, was more available because they had, common interest when they would do things together. And I just remember being sad about that, but also like so happy, right? So happy that they had that, they had that bond, and they could really enjoy each other in a way that I couldn't do it with him, so my husband was able to do that. And I think that if we can always try to kind of look about, like, there's always, there is a loss, but there could be something there that's gained if we can really open our eyes to see what that might be. What is that I could be gaining here? And sometimes it's painful because it's not what you expected, you didn't wish for. Maybe you didn't want this to happen. But still, there's always a lesson. There's always something you can learn about yourself from all of these losses and all these moments, of kind of grieving and mourning something. There's always something that you can learn from it. I feel like if you'll spend the time in some reflection and thinking about that.
You really have given us a lot to think about, and it's really all so true. We can't avoid these losses. They're going to
Right.
come, and people to to have hope is really a big part of this. It's
Hmm.
not to get lost in feeling either trapped or that there's nothing good will come of this, or just laying down and saying, "Oh, that's the end of it for me."
Yeah.
It really takes a lot of courage to feel sad
Hmm.
and then get up and move again
Right.
and accept that life is going to support us in that somehow. The right person will come.
Right.
The job will show up eventually.
Hmm.
Something along those lines, I think. And so the suck piece is the one that worries a lot of therapists, I think, right? We have
Hmm.
dealt with people that stay in that place that you were talking about.
Right.
And a lot of the people that have agreed to do videos here have different techniques that they
Yeah.
use with people. So is there some special, are a registered play therapist.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
How would you move somebody through grief using that?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, first, I want to emphasize what you said because it's so important about the idea about hope. I mean, hope is to me the crux of the work that we do as therapists. We should do our best to open that window to see that, yes, there is hope. It may not feel like it right now, but we'll get through this. You'll get through this. As far as techniques, that's a great question. And I consider myself a kind of play, art expressive therapist. I really like kind of playing around and trying different modalities as far as like sand tray and, like a drawing activity. And the drawing activity can be just like getting a color, choosing a color. Like I'll tell kids sometimes about how you're feeling right now and just scribble it on the piece of paper, right? Just to kind of let that out. And so, as far as techniques, I would say that using, of course, adults are more comfortable with words, but sometimes words can be hard. So, a lot of times I'll use a sand tray technique where I'll have people choose some images about how they're feeling in this moment. And sometimes the images takes us out of our own heads, and the images become a metaphor. And the image might be the dragons on top of a bridge, in the sand tray. Well, how's that dragon? So you get out of your own head and you ask questions sort of in the third person. How's that dragon going to get across that bridge? What does the dragon need? Right. And sometimes it's like that idea, like, I'm not asking what you need. I'm saying, what does the dragon need? And oftentimes there's a correlation, what the dragon needs and what the person needs. And it's such a more it's a little bit has a little bit more impact sometimes than just, again, because people, like I was saying earlier, can kind of get stuck and kind of use the same old script. They have this narrative they got going in their brains. But if I bring a dragon into it, it kind of shifts their thinking. They can be a little bit more creative and open it up a little bit more. So I
Yeah,
hope that's making sense.
it
So
absolutely does. And just looking at your backdrop there, we can see that creativity is part of the game, right?
yes, yes, yes.
And
I like creating myself too. It's very therapeutic in my own world. So
I think helping an adult to go back to the childhood ways of expression is so
mhm.
important because
Yes.
so many wounds happen in childhood, but that's really the place where creativity is
Mhm.
thriving.
Right.
And so you're also giving them that opportunity to shift their thinking, their ideas, the way they're looking at something, the way that they might have dealt with something before. Now there's a new possibility opens up because they're
Mhm.
freer. They're in a
Mhm.
freer space, emotionally and mentally.
Yeah.
Well, this has been a delight to talk to you. I love that that you're part of this project and that people can walk away saying, "Oh, no wonder I was feeling so sad."
Mhm.
It's okay to feel sad that this thing happened and it wasn't what I expected. It's not
Mhm.
what I want. Things
Mhm.
may not look the way I want them to even for the near future, but I'm going to stay hopeful
Right.
and I'm going to do the work. So,
Mhm.
you are a gift to the world and the gift to me and to all the people that are watching this today.
Oh, thank you.
Any last words for us?
Um, well, I just want to say thank you so much for doing this and doing this project. I think you're really going to help a lot of people, and I'm excited to see what your next project's going to be, because I think this one's really going to be powerful and is going to help a lot of people. And I really do want to thank you for doing this and taking the time. And you're doing it just out of your heart. So, and that's where really the best things come from, right?
Well, thank you so much. I do appreciate that. So I'm going to ask you to come back because I know you have a lot of wisdom to share.
Well,
And
thank you.
I have a feeling that this is going to go on well past 30 days, um,
Mm,
because, people are coming forward and saying, this is
mhm.
important, and feeling like I need to say more. So please come back.
I will do that. I'll do
Thank
that.
you.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Thank you. So we'll say bye for now.
Okay, bye-bye.